Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into one of the most critical pieces of tech regulation out there, the European Union's AI Act. And we're going to zero in on one single, powerful section at its core, Article 14, all about human oversight. And that right there is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's what the EU was trying to solve with this groundbreaking AI Act. And the answer, or at least the start of one, is tucked away in Article 14. The whole point is to make sure that no matter how smart AI gets, there's always a human who can, pull the plug. Okay, so let's get into it. To really wrap our heads around this law, we first have to understand what it's targeting. See, the AI Act doesn't cover every AI out there. Instead, it really hones in on a special category called high risk. So what does that actually mean? Well, the EU defines these as systems that could have a major, and I mean major, negative impact on our lives. We're not talking about the AI that suggests your next TV show. We're talking about systems where one little mistake could have really serious consequences. And this distinction is so important because it lets regulators focus their energy where it matters most. So let's look at a few examples of what they mean. First up, biometric surveillance. Think about those systems that can identify you in a crowd just by using your face or the way you walk. The Act has this detailed list called Annex 3 that points to this as a huge risk area, mostly because of what it could mean for our privacy and our freedom. Okay, next we've got AI that manages our critical infrastructure. This is the stuff that controls our water supply, our electricity grids, our transportation systems. A failure here, well, it's not just an inconvenience, right? It could be absolutely catastrophic. And this one is so crucial. AI that makes life-changing decisions about you. This is stuff like AI used in hiring to sift through resumes, AI that decides if you get a loan, or AI that determines if you can access things like social services. I mean, these are decisions that literally shape people's entire futures. So when the stakes are that high, how does Article 14 actually propose to manage all that risk? Well, it lays out a pretty clear blueprint for human oversight, and it's all built on this idea of shared responsibility. Now, what I find really fascinating here is how this creates a clear chain of responsibility. It starts with a company that builds the AI. They're called the provider, and they have to build in safeguards from the get-go. Then it flows down to the organization that actually uses the AI, the deployer, and it's their job to implement the rules and keep an eye on it. It's basically a legal handoff, designed so that no one can just throw up their hands and say, hey, the algorithm did it. And this is absolutely key. The human in the loop can't just be some passive observer. Article 14 basically gives them a toolkit. They need to get the system's limits. They have to be aware of something called automation bias, which is our natural tendency to just trust a machine a little too much. And they need to have the clear authority to ignore the AI, override it, or just hit the big red stop button. This is all about active, meaningful control. But why go through all this trouble? Why create such a detailed and complex framework? Well, it's because the AI Act is trying to solve this fundamental tug-of-war that's happening right at the heart of modern technology. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. It really is a balancing act. On one side, you've got the market pushing for speed, innovation, and all the economic benefits. But on the other side, you have the need to protect our basic human rights, which calls for caution and safeguards. Article 14, well, it's the thing trying to keep that balance from tipping over. Okay, so the blueprint sounds pretty clear, but we all know the real world is messy. And the Factor Act gets that. It actually builds in some really important exceptions and acknowledges that there are some big hurdles still ahead. Which brings us to a huge point of debate. Article 14 has this controversial exception. For most high-risk biometric systems, you need two people to verify what the AI finds. But, and this is a big but, that rule can be waived for law enforcement, migration, and border control if they decide it's disproportionate. In the real world, that could mean an agency argues that the two-person rule is just too slow in a certain situation, and they get to bypass it. And yeah, this little carve-out is a massive point of contention. This is where critics and human rights groups are really raising the alarm. They argue it creates this giant loophole in some of the most sensitive areas, exactly where the potential for misuse and harm is the absolute highest. So, another challenge is something we can call the compliance vacuum. This timeline just shows the problem perfectly. The AI Act is the law of the land, right? But the super detailed technical standards, the nitty-gritty of how you actually comply with it, are still being written. This creates this weird period of uncertainty for companies who know they have to follow the rules, but don't know exactly what that looks like yet. And for all of us, that means the full protections of the Act might not be applied consistently right out of the gate. Which really leaves us with this final and, I think, crucial question. The AI Act is all about putting a human in the loop to control the machine. But as we build these incredibly powerful systems of control, we also have to figure out how to make sure they're used wisely, justly, and without bias. Because in the end, the challenge isn't just about controlling the AI, it's really about holding ourselves accountable.